compared to straight freezes done back in the 60s. Very limited amounts of damage to fix. But what about memory loss? There are two issues here. One is the continuity of consciousness thing. Again, who remembers what they dreamt about last night? Okay, I remember some of my dreams. Hazy, not very clear. Now, you were still you then, you're still you now. That memory loss is something that some people have decided the best way to go about that is simply by life journaling. Simply to create a journal of your life, starting with the broader aspects and filling in all the finer details, just as a bit of a hobby when you have time, and that this will serve as a memory jog. Much in the same fashion that if you hear a piece of music that you haven't heard in 10 years, suddenly you may get a sudden memory of something from 10 years back that you haven't considered. And if somebody had asked you about it in the meantime, you would say, I don't remember anything about that. But the information is there inside, and it's simply a matter of retrieving it. This is essentially akin to, using again the analogy of the body as a machine, a colleague of mine who worked for a publishing company, actually, an exam board a little while back, used to work with the police, forensics, recovering information from computers. And he pointed out how somebody could take a hard drive with something naughty on it, and they could cut it up, cut it up into little pieces, melt it down, and as long as the temperature didn't go below the melting point of silicon, which I forget momentarily, but it's very high. As long as the temperature didn't go higher than that, he'll still be able to retrieve it, the information that was in it.
I think he's exaggerating.
No, essentially what he's done is created a laundry list of ways that you can't remove the information because that is still there within the silicon if the silicon hasn't melted. And it's essentially a matter of using a supercomputer to do a very complex jigsaw. Now, this can be done to retrieve files on computers. Files on computers are not nearly as complex as the memories in the human brain. This is why we will require bigger, better supercomputers than we have currently. I think we're all agreed that bigger, better computers are on the way. Possibly smaller, better computers, but you get my gist. What about the ostensibly terminal condition if the patient was in upon cryopreservation? I wouldn't expect that this is likely a thing that would come up in such a group as there is today, but a lot of people out there will say, if you die of cancer, when you still have the cancer when you're brought back. Not after all that lot. First of all, in the instance of cancer specifically, there are ways of killing cells, and frankly, some of the things we do will kill the cells in the human body. It's just a matter of making them work again afterwards. And if you're going to go to all the lengths of fixing all the other damage in the body, then by that point, the cancer is, hardly a consideration because you're fixing it on a cellular level anyway. Same goes for most other issues. For example, my example earlier of a gunshot wound. If you're repairing things on a cellular level, then patching up a gunshot wound isn't rocket science.
A virus would be more of a problem, wouldn't it? Because
a virus would certainly be more of a problem. Because that's actually a DNA issue.
And you'd have to parse a whole lot of DNA and then figure out which ones weren't contaminated, and then use those to repatch the others.
Yeah.
Bit of a nightmare. But, yeah.
A virus would certainly be more problematic than certainly a lot of other diseases, which is why, as I say, cancer is often the people make up as cancer isn't viral, but it's the same thing. It's something happening on a cellular level. Just exactly the same as somebody who's had a preservation in perfect conditions is going to come out a lot later than the gentleman who had his brain stored in his abdominal cavity during transport. So you were gesturing that way. Was there a question?
It was just one
issue.
You're saying there about if there's a contaminant like a virus or something present in the human body, and therefore we can remove it because we're at a cellular level. What about the other way round? A human being is cryogenically preserved today. they're brought back in 300 years' time to perfect health, to the perfect state they were before, minus whatever killed them. In 200 years, the environmental viruses, bacteriums have mutated and changed, but their immune system is designed for the viruses.
I think that medicine will probably be a little advanced by then.
Yes, but effectively everyone comes back with AIDS.
Well,
Effectively, a failure of the immune system at that point in time. More than that, just to finish off, and then I'll shut up. There's now a lot of evidence that the human body, which hasn't been known. You said about the bacteria earlier. There are more bacterial cells in the human body than there are human cells, and each of those bacteria, a lot of them, especially in the gut, provide significant sort of jobs. It's a question about whether the people you bring back are sterile, and therefore you need to provide. Again, I suppose in 100 years there'll be.
One of the main underlying assumptions of cryonics is that medical science will continue to advance.
That's what Activa's for.
Yes.
Yes. Come on, the cryostat, have one of those little units.
Actually, just to reassure you on that point, it is possible to make, and it's been done since the 60s, animals that are completely pathogen-free, no microorganisms at all, by delivering them in a sterile technique through cesarean section, and they do live out their lives just fine. You do need to provide them with B vitamins, though. Bacteria in the gut make B vitamins.
Yeah, same with B6.
So I think it's a fairly safe assumption that medical science continues to.
No, honestly, I'd say I was just providing the point.
Can I ask a question about a practical consideration that could be considered today, but that might help when the people revive? Is that if you're worried about surface area to volume ratio when you're cooling the tissue, and you're also assuming that in the future we'll have all the nanotechnology to repair the body, has anyone thought of actually slicing up things like the brain and cryogenically preserving them in slices? Then there will be less cell damage, and therefore when you put it back together there will be the nanotech to actually repatch things
not
together.
Slices, but certainly parts.
Yeah.
I think Anders has been
well,
researching
I always felt it was my cue, but of course I'm maybe not kind of mainstream cryonics since I'm interested in whole brain manipulation. But that definitely involves slicing up brains, but we're not interested in bringing them back biologically, we're interested in scanning them. And then we're ending up with a big pile of biological goo, which is not going to be viable. And hopefully, assuming a long laundry list of various philosophical and technical assumptions, something running on a computer. But I think most people who like cryonics are conservative by their nature. They actually want their body to be alive again. So I think I'm quite a lot in the minority here. But again, from a cooling perspective, you're completely right. But even if my only goal is to get a nicely cooled brain to do my study on, it's still pretty tricky to actually cool it in a proper manner.
Yeah, Inger actually proposed that in '64 in the book Prospecting Immortality that launched the cryonics movement. But the other ways to cool, you have the vasculature. In other words, you have the blood vessels, and the greatest distance between any capillary and another one is under 0.5 millimeter. So if you could use gas as a heat exchange medium or fluorocarbon, liquid perfluorochemical, you can achieve very fast cooling rates. The peak rate we achieved with fluorocarbon was in the range of about 5 degrees Celsius a minute.
It was just a question of, is there something different we can be doing today?
Sure, there are a lot of things
Assuming we'll have,
better.
this
A lot of things we could be doing different, but a lot of reasons why we aren't, but I guess that's another lecture.
Something just occurred to me to ask.
Yes.
Do you, or perhaps does Mike, know what the proportion of people who are signed up for cryonics go for neuropreservation head only?
I don't know the statistics.
It's dropping. It's dropping. It used to be all CI is all whole body. They don't take neuros.
That's why I don't know.
Alcor. Alcor used to be 2 to 1, and now I believe it is right at the tipping point where it may be 50-50 or even more towards whole body.
So the trend is towards whole body?
Trend solidly towards whole body with Alcor.
Is there any reason why the trend is
I can speculate, but I don't have any
Whole body
hard
vitrification
reasons.
is getting
In Russia,
better?
there's a strong, amongst the people who are signed up, there is a strong prejudice towards neuro. In fact, it's a lot like cryotics was at Alcor in the early 1980s. There's a lot of almost hostility and contempt for the whole body.
Well, I know that's certainly why Alan Sinclair switched from CI to Alcor, because they were offering whole body vitrification. So I think that's
Alan
a
switched
pushback
back
from
and
a lot of
forth so
people.
many times I've lost track.
Because a lot of these issues that people do mention, problems like, what if we've got disease and stuff, I mean, if we're